Hi, there's a lot of pepper here. Sins of our fathers is passed on to the children. A lot of people always assume, they always talk about bad blood. Bad blood. Basically, diseases is genetic makeup. So if someone in your line contacted syphilis, and syphilis was widespread, it affected the body, the genetic makeup, and then it was passed on to the children as well. If the woman, the wife, they bring home the disease, or the mistress, or the prostitutes, or whatever, it's not wasn't fun. It was no cure for it at the time. So if they was pregnant and was carrying an unborn child, even though the child might not have been born with the syphilis disease, what happened is his or her genetic makeup was altered. It means it was more apt to become sick of certain diseases that wouldn't have happened before. As the genetic makeup continues on, if they was into some kind of drugs, opium or whatever, the genetic makeup was passed on to the child. So what happens is we develop these disorders, these genetic markers, and they passed on whether they're dormant or not. You can go 7 generations back, and it can still affect you. Another thing is during the time when the men went into the war, masses of war, masses of healthy men end up dying. So a lot of the strong genetic makeup was no longer there. They always took the strongest and the healthiest and the finest for the training and things like that, and they left the weaker genetic makeup people behind. So thus, a lot of the strong DNA markers was destroyed, leaving the weaker genetic markups in place. So you had people who was passing these diseases around. It's like Africa, for example. They're talking how many there's children out there with no parents. The parents are passing the AIDS on to the children. The men are passing the AIDS to the wife or the girlfriends or whatever, and then they're passing the AIDS on to the children that's being born, because it does not always show right off the bat. So the genetic makeup's there, and thus the sickness is there, and many of the adults are not making it for a number of years, and they're dying. And the children who are getting treated with it are dependent upon other sources of donations to give them the medication they need. Unfortunately, if it's not there, many of the children are not going to make it as well. There's always been speculation about, it came from a monkey and blah, 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 blah. There's always been rumors that it was let loose to reduce the gay population. But then when it started getting into the non-gay population, or the bisexual population, or whatever you want to choose, and it started affecting children, and blood donation started getting into other people. Since one person got AIDS from a dentist area, what happened is the tools was not properly cleaned, and the person before that who had their teeth done did not tell them they had AIDS, or they may not even knew they had AIDS. So when they cleaned this person's, there was still some AIDS virus attached to it and got into this person's system. So the funny thing is when it started affecting the children and the straight people, as they want to put it, then things changed. There started being more treatments for it, where before a lot of the gay people just simply swiveled away and just passed away, and they was gone. That's basically what's happening in Africa. Many of them's not going to be treated because there's no treatment there. I mean, their treatment's very limited. And even if they had it, a lot of them don't want to treat them. So, and that's just among some of the things. That's what I'm saying. Anytime there's an outbreak, usually a third of the world is affected. For some reason or another, if you look at all the history books, it seems to be always a third of it. The genetic makeup, it goes after the weakest people a lot of times. It goes after the people who has most diseases and stuff in their genetic makeup, or they don't have that they don't have that immune gene with them. So then they end up dying from it, being exposed to it. During the medieval times and all that, what they did is they made people seal up in their homes. And it was the worst thing to do, because then the one person that was sick spread it to the other people in the family, and often the whole family died, or maybe just one was left. So that's the whole thing. You think about it. Sins of the fathers passed on to the child is really the genetic makeup. If a man, for example, has sex with a number of women, or had 4 or 5 wives, or 10 wives, or whatever the deal is, they passed that disease on. There was countless number of people dying of syphilis. There was countless number of people was dying of other diseases called bad blood, because they didn't know how to treat it. It was just called bad blood. They would do bloodletting and other things. So they died of these diseases, being exposed to it. It's sad to say. I mean, even though we've come a long way on treatments and stuff, there is still out there. And I really believe there's areas where they would release things, if they could, to reduce the human population, if they felt they could do it, if they could get away. And I think people always figured it out somehow to affect the human population somehow a little without being aware of it. We don't know about, it's claimed that the monkeys was the one that had the AIDS, and that how it got started. So that is what was claimed, that it was traced back to a monkey that had it. But the question is, how did that monkey have the AIDS and it managed to get transmitted? It's a big question. So same way with the other countries. The other diseases that affect them, they affect the immune system when the people are down and out, sick and weak. It affects the immune system and destroys more people. It's a genetic makeup, a genetic makeup. If you are an alcoholic, a woman, alcoholic, you are going to pass that to your child. Many children are born with mental issues and stuff because parents was very alcoholic. The mother's born. I've heard them talk about where when the child was being born, the whole room smelled like alcohol from her constantly drinking, even while she was pregnant, and the child was born with this disorder. So whatever disorder was in this child and that child has another child, now that genetic makeup is in that child as well. Every time we do something, the sin of our fathers, the sins of our mothers, is passed on through genetic markers. Somehow, some way, it is passed on. So that's basically what it is. Even though we've come a long way, what has happened is that many of the young people are sick. New issues have developed. They have damages. So the genetic markers is in that person when they're carrying that child. That genetic marker is there, and it is being passed on to that child from the genetic markers that that person has developed over a course of time. So it's a lot to think about what we are doing to ourselves. We are passing what we do in our life on to our children, and our children is passing on to that children. So whatever I have wrong with me was acquired from past genetic markers. Am I lucky compared to many of them? Yes. Do I have issues? Yes. Am I a fighter? Yes. Am I a survivor? Yes. But that's not always the case. It's nothing worse than watching your child with cancer dying in front of your eyes. And you're doing everything you can to save that child. And you're wondering, why did that child get it and I don't have it? Because the genetic markers lied dormant. And just happened to be, unfortunately, the child got it. And then people blames God for this happening. But you know what? We created these problems. God gave us free will. And we, our descendants, and we created these problems through things that happened. 7 generations back could be 700 years. And think about that. Someone 700 years ago carried a genetic marker that was passed down from one generation and left dormant until, unfortunately, the child was the one that got affected. It's a lot to think about. There's a lot of prepper here. I want you to be safe, be happy. Bless you all.